Thursday, April 24th. This is a special meeting of the Caldwell Urban Renewal Agency. Got three things on our agenda this evening, and we will begin with a discussion on the potential Caldwell Central City Urban Renewal Agency project area. And that brings us to Mr. Jenkins. Welcome, Stephen.
Thank you, Chairman. Appreciate it. Commissioners, good evening. Thank you for the opportunity to come up and speak about the Caldwell Central Urban Renewal District. Of course, this is a proposed plan, and I'm looking forward to discussing this in greater detail. We have had numerous discussions about this topic. I would say I looked at my records and I saw multiple presentations from 2024 and even into 2023. So I think the time is perhaps ripe to move forward with a plan, and I'm happy to discuss this further. So, Emmanuel, do you happen to have the PowerPoint up by chance? Awesome. I'll get into that, but this is, so for me, the goal and the intent is to give you guys an idea of the boundaries that staff has looked at in greater depth, and then also wanted to better understand the projects that could be proposed within the lines of that boundary. And then lastly, understanding the path, thank you, Emmanuel, the path forward on the next steps to integrate this into an actual plan so we can start getting to work. So here we go. Wanted to start off with, let me see here. All right, perfect, got it. Okay, so a little bit of history. So this is the 1998 allocation area, which sunset in 2022. This green boundary that is identified, a little green and purple mix there, ultimately is comprised of about 4,400 acres. It was rather large. We accomplished a lot within that plan. So Sky Ranch was a major focus for that area, as well as North Ranch. So industrial overall was a major focal point. A lot of the things that we did well, I believe, was we went and got those sites more or less shovel ready, which in economic development industry is ultimately making those sites prepared for development. So water, sewer, gas, power, all those things were tied into the properties within Sky Ranch, those 400 acres out there, which now evolved into a Class A, premier business park, and really excited about the evolution of that business park with thriving business there. So downtown revitalization was a big deal as well. So Indian Creek Plaza, Indian Creek itself, the uncovering of the creek, all that was tied to the previous district in 1998 that sunset in 22. Transportation on U-Stick, of course, was a big one. ADA sidewalk improvements, wastewater treatment plant improvements, all those things and many, many more were tied to the allocation district of the Caldwell East Urban Renewal District that sunset. Okay, so this big swath of land is a racially or ethnically concentrated area. It's an R/ECAP. It's designated by HUD. HUD is the Housing and Urban Development Group, Department of Housing and Urban Development. Ultimately, this is an area that is designated by HUD, and ultimately you need to have the majority of the population within that area needs to be a minority or ethnically based, and then also needs to be you guys can see the threshold for poverty there. It's 40% or more individuals living at or below the poverty line. So that big swath of land there from Linden to north past Centennial up near Chicago, touching our North Urban Renewal boundary is just that. So that's an area that I believe, I don't know how many designations are in the state of Idaho, maybe just this one, if I'm not mistaken. I know there are very few. So this is something that, of course, is in terms of economic development, is something that we focus on. We want to try to ameliorate as much as we can. Why it matters, HUD uses the R/ECAP data to better understand patterns of poverty, segregation, and the like, access to opportunity and jobs, those types of things. So local governments across the country, they address these areas specifically with investments in affordable housing, economic development, education, and transportation. Okay, so 2021, this is obviously one that you all know very well, approximately 1,800 acres in the North Caldwell Urban Renewal District, focusing heavily on infrastructure, as you all are aware, water, sewer, all those things, roads are very important for this to move forward, and we've talked a lot about it, so I won't exhaust the topic, but ultimately the goal is to place an emphasis on industrial and commercial development. Okay, so this is resolution 189-14. It was established in December 14th, 2014. And ultimately, this was a resolution by the city of Caldwell finding that unsanitary or unsafe dwelling accommodations exist within the city. And thereby, the North End Neighborhood Revitalization District was established. The resolution declares that there's a current need for the Caldwell Housing Authority, CHA, to function within the North End Neighborhood Revitalization District. That's a mouthful, but ultimately it says that there is a need there for CHA to step in many instances to help support those residential structures that need that extra attention. You guys can see the boundaries outlined here. And that leads us to the new proposed central urban renewal allocation area. So in yellow here, that is resolution 189-14, and the red is an addendum to that. So ultimately outlining areas that staff and in discussing this with the chair here, just ultimately decided that there were opportunities beyond that area within resolution 189-14 that we felt could be aligned with this new district. Of course, we went and used the boundary to the south, and you guys can see a closer version of this on the map that you have in front of you, but ultimately we used that rail line as a southern boundary and then the freeway as a northern boundary, more or less. We want to go west and just get right up to the boundary of the North Caldwell Urban Renewal District that is currently active today. Okay, so this is an image in pink of the North Urban Renewal District, and in green, that's our former district that expired in 2022. That's Caldwell East, but this is just a segment of it, and part of it overlaps with the proposed Central Urban Renewal District. So it just gives you an idea of what we looked at in terms of the boundaries of the north to the proposed Central Urban Renewal District. So ultimately, want to outline a couple projects that I felt might be necessitated by within these boundaries and aligned with the area and the needs and the opportunities that exist in the North End Revitalization District. Chicago Street is a big one, so this is Centennial to Franklin, ultimately just improving that corridor all the way through, sidewalk infrastructure, those types of things, just making sure it's consistent all the way through there. Many of you locally have driven through that corridor, don't have to go into great detail on it, but ultimately that's a focal point for us. We have some unpaved streets, particularly on Main Street going west from downtown west, and we felt like that's an area that we could cover as well. Disregard that Linden improvements. I was looking at a different map, so we'll scratch that for now. Road resurfacing on 5th, so that's something that I've talked to Rob McDonald within Public Works about quite a bit, but there are some road resurfacing projects that we're on the radar in terms of engineering and Public Works that we can certainly tackle within this project list. The other one was with the railroad and the quiet zone, those upcoming improvements. Of course, that's already been allocated through the city budget, but if there's anything that's perhaps overlapping in terms of mutual interest with urban renewal, I didn't want to disregard that, just wanted to keep that as an opportunity that we might be able to embark on as well. Wastewater expansion, so there is some land near the wastewater treatment plant that is meant for expansion in the future. If that's something that is triggered during the course of perhaps this 20-year plan or whatever the case is, then that could be a focal point as well. Park enhancements, irrigation, bridge improvements. I had the opportunity to visit Wilson Station in Boise with Councilman Dittenberg and Mayor Wagner earlier this week, and we saw a project that with the support of CCDC, which is Boise's Urban Renewal District, they were able to relocate some irrigation canals that were intersecting with the site that had this workforce housing project on it. And I just felt like if that was something that we encountered within this North District, that could certainly be something we can touch upon as well or handle as we move forward with corresponding projects. Revitalization, Franklin Road and Chicago area, that's an area, of course, that's experienced a lot of growth as you go down 21st. We really see that as a gateway into Caldwell. Just want to make sure everything's tidied up along that corridor. Downtown, north of the railroad tracks, 10th Avenue corridor is a big one. Parking facilities, if that's added within this district in the future, of course, that could be addressed. And then safety and blight. Sidewalks, pedestrian access in residential areas. What we don't want to see is a disconnect between downtown and the North End area. So if you're a visitor coming in and you see a show or you go down to the farmer's market with Destination Caldwell, and then you start walking and traveling in different areas, we don't want you to feel like you're in a different community. So making sure that that sidewalk infrastructure, those roads all connect well. Indian Creek pathways, trails, green belts, talked a lot about this. Quality of life is a very, very big component within economic development. But beyond that, there are some great opportunities along the Boise River that I feel we can certainly take advantage of as a community. And then lastly, street lighting and safety improvements. This is a big one. As I've traveled across the country, street lighting is a very important aspect of any given downtown. The perception of safety is important as well. So those are things that we want to make sure to implement. Of course, this is just a starting point. We would take a more detailed look at this as staff as we look to put this in front of City Council, if that's the direction that this governing body would like to go in. But just wanted to give you guys a brief snapshot of what could be accomplished within this district if approved. Okay, and I'll leave the rest of my time for discussion. If you have any questions, I'm happy to address those.
Very good. Thank you, Stephen. Questions?
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Doty?
I don't have any at the time, but we've already discussed this, I think, in detail, so if something else pops up here in a minute, I would be glad to share that with you. I think it's clear that the north side is in need of a lot of structure. I also think that it does not interfere with the Roger Brooks concept coming to town, and that's why we made the boundaries where they are, that certainly there's still a downtown district that will seek his advice if that comes to fruition. I still have not seen that come forward yet, so that's enough for now.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Doty. Other comments? Chris?
I just kind of want to echo what Councilman Doty said. Again, I don't know the status of the Roger Brooks campaign, but I feel like his ideas could definitely help us identify the goals we want to do for this area. You know, whatever, and I can't even imagine what he would say, but I believe you know, we have to have fairly specific goals, and hopefully some of what he says could be implemented in this project.
Good, thank you, Chris. Mr. Moore, any comments? No. Okay. Well, Stephen, why don't you remind us what next steps would look like?
Great, and before I do that, Chair, if you would allow me, I wanted to throw a little bit of a curveball at you. I never was a pitcher. I played second base, but because I wasn't a pitcher, I like to throw these curveballs now. So there is a property, it's about a half-acre property that's under the ownership of Urban Renewal. We've talked about it a number of times in Urban Renewal meetings. You know, it crossed my mind as we were looking at these boundaries for this proposed district to potentially rope that property into this district for future development consideration. I thought that given the timing that it would take to establish this district and then a proposed site-specific district and working that out, and then of course staff time and feasibility studies and everything that goes into establishing a district, it just made more sense to me, at least as I was looking at this map, to possibly include that if there's an interest in seeing that redeveloped in the near future. So we have had some interest that has come through my office between me and Ophelia, talking to different groups. So I know that is something that has come across at least my desk, and I just wanted to throw that out for your consideration as we look to secure these boundaries.
Is that, Stephen, is that property adjacent already to what we wouldn't have to make some unique carve-out to include it?
Yes, great question. So I wish I had a laser pointer, but ultimately it's on if you look down at the middle, it looks like we have one. You mind if I come grab that from me?
I'll throw you a fastball. Sure.
All right. So it is actually right here. So my thought was we could just come in, grab a rope, and come in here.
We can't see
Oh.
it. You gotta point it behind you.
I could see it just fine, so I thought it was great. So
And then they
back
can't
here,
see
is that
it.
good? All right, there we go. All right, perfect. So, all right, so just right here is where the property is. So I thought we could maybe extend this line this way, grab this property, perhaps even the Chase property if that was of interest, as we look to redevelop that property as well. But ultimately, it's just right at the edge of the boundary there.
Okay, thank you, Stephen.
So basically between 5th and 7th, roughly?
So actually, 5th is right here,
Yeah.
and this is Main. So we would just be going down Main a little bit right there, and then grabbing it, and then pulling it back in. So it connects pretty well. It's adjacent to the southern boundary of this map here.
Mr. Doty?
Mr. Chair, I'd be in support of anything that already touches the boundary or is close to the boundary that is bare ground that Urban Renewal was recently in and now is no longer in. I certainly am not in support of giving any more money to those that have already taken support, but certainly if there's bare ground there that we haven't developed yet, I would be in favor of.
Thank you, Mr. Doty. Any other comments? Well, back to next steps. What would that look like?
Great. So Mr. Hilty had put together an outline of steps to implement urban renewal. And just following the things that he had outlined, basically the steps we're in step 2 of what he had proposed. So ultimately this is communication between staff, and it could be a developer, it could be an individual in the community. We've had a number of folks talk about this area specifically. So we're in that proposal to the agency phase right now in terms of the boundaries. The next phase would be determining eligibility, and that would have to go to city council to determine this area fulfills the state requirements for blight and deterioration in a particular area of the city. And provided that gets approved, then there would be a planning process. So city staff would look at this and work with our legal team to assess the projects that would be applicable in this area. We would just flesh those out more thoroughly. There would be a lot of, I would guess, iterations of that. I've been involved in a couple of them. Public Works is heavily involved, engineering's heavily involved. Ultimately, make sure that you all feel comfortable with the direction of that project list. We'd look at financial feasibility. We would do a feasibility study for the district as a whole, as you all are well aware of, so that would probably likely be contracted out given the size of this area. It would certainly take some time to get there, but ultimately beyond, after that point, the agency would approve for things to move forward, and then it would go back to city council for the second time, and then council would ultimately adopt it in the form of a resolution, and then it would go to planning and zoning committee. P&Z committee would make sure that the plan and the project conforms with the direction of development for the city, and then it would go back to city council for a third time to be formally adopted and activated as an urban renewal district, and then we'd be free to play ball and get things done and, fulfill the obligations of the projects that we've outlined. And if that's an RFP, if that's, working on streetscape, whatever the case is, we would start to initiate steps to get there.
Just a comment.
Mr. Doty?
On the wastewater treatment plan, I saw that it was in there. I don't think it was in some of the maps we've seen, so I want to ensure that that's in there. I think every counselor that's sitting in this room right now, maybe not Counselor Stoddard, I haven't had time to brief him on it because we can't have too many people at once or we get into a weird situation there, but we definitely need to be looking at our wastewater treatment plant and our biohazards and solids that are coming from there for the future. So even if it doesn't have any money in it to do anything today, in 20 years when all of our children are up here going, where's the money at? Certainly we're going to try and do something with that, but we need to plan for the future with what we're going to do with our, I'll just be honest, with our human waste. And so I just want to make sure that that's captured in there and that it's written in a manner in accordance with the law that makes it available to anything and everything that we would like to try and accomplish there, so that that isn't further passed on to the taxpayer.
Yeah, that's a great comment, Commissioner Doty. I agree fully. It's actually here, and I won't make the same mistake by not showing you guys, but it's just right there, the wastewater treatment plant. So it's within the boundaries as outlined, and I often joke with people that I've visited the wastewater treatment plant. I've seen some things that will never escape my memory, but just so important in terms of our growth and development. You got to make sure your wastewater treatment plant is in place. Those upgrades through urban renewal were critical for our growth, the growth that we're experiencing today. So I think that is an important aspect of where the future leads. And as we look at the evolution of Caldwell, you certainly don't want to leave that aspect of it out.
Stephen, several months ago when we were speaking with a developer about the amphitheater project, they had kind of penciled it in on the area there at Wittenberger Park, and an agency of the city that I had never heard of before kind of rose up and said, no, we don't like this idea, which is fine. I mean, that's part of their charter. As this develops forward, it would be great to have their input on new amenities at Wittenberger Park. We've got a fantastic river flowing through the city, but our greenbelt is underutilized because it's kind of shabby compared to some of the other things. And getting their feedback would probably be really beneficial to us too, as that's built out.
Chairman, that's a great point. I've actually become friends with a member of the Greenbelt Civic League, and that this individual is keen to tell me from time to time about Indian Creek and following that into downtown and how we can create a trail or a pathway that ties into the Caldwell Event Center all the way into downtown Caldwell. And the vision for that is great. But I see the same thing, the same phenomenon taking place up in this area along the Boise River. The city of Boise's done a terrific job with their greenbelt and made it a terrific amenity for the community. I hope to replicate those efforts in Caldwell. We've disregarded it for too long, in my opinion, and I think that there's some opportunity there that we can certainly take advantage of. Greenbelt Civic League is a great entity. They have a great future vision for what that could look like in the future, and Wittenberger is the launch pad into that. So my hope is that we can get out there and expand it and beautify it and just continue to make advancements.
Great. Any other questions for Stephen? Mr. Allgood?
Not exactly for Stephen, but more for Mr. Hilty, if he would entertain a question. So, in this new plan, there's quite a few parcels that are government-owned, city-owned or government-owned. I know the rules change on urban renewal kind of every legislative session. What, are you aware of what the current rules are of including them in an urban renewal area?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Allgood, that I don't think that has been restrictions on including publicly owned property in urban renewal areas. We will be vetting that as we go forward. There have been, and there are restrictions on certain projects. The construction of, I'm trying to remember exactly the word, public buildings is really what it is. And there's a definition. It's a little bit more of a complicated analysis as to what constitutes a public building. And then there's also some thresholds for the investment that could be made in that. We'll make sure that the projects that we outline for this don't run afoul, of course, of the law. Generally, park-type improvements, and I think probably, the kinds of utility improvements, wastewater-type improvements are not likely to fit that definition of public buildings. So that's a long answer, but the first, I don't think there's any prohibition about including the property, some of which could evolve in 20 years into other uses and perhaps private uses.
Yeah.
And then others of it will have some restrictions about what can be built. Currently, I think, the concept of certain water treatment and utility infrastructure would not be prohibited.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Any other comments?
Mr. Chair,
Ms. Warwick?
I was listening on my way here, so I heard what you said. I think, like Mr. Doty said, I think looping in any properties that are already touching that area, I think are a great idea. Wastewater treatment plant is a good one. It's not glamorous, but very necessary. Thank you.
Mr. Allgood?
It might be appropriate to call the roll since we're partway through this meeting, make sure we know.
We're just waiting for Julie. Yeah. Would the secretary call the roll? Thank you, Chris.
Commissioner Porter?
Here.
Commissioner Brooks is not here. Commissioner Warwick?
Here.
Commissioner Doty?
Here.
Commissioner Moore?
Here.
Commissioner Allgood?
Here.
Commissioner Cole?
I am now.
Thank you. Thanks again, Chris. Stephen, there will be plenty of opportunities for example, the residents that live in this area to come and speak to certain projects that, from their vantage point, they would like to see the city entertain.
Yes, Chairman, that is a great point, and we've heard from a community member, of course, in this room during urban renewal meetings, but beyond that, I hope to engage the community at a greater level, and obviously there are a lot of ideas that are thrown out here. Of course, there are improvements that are being proposed to Lions Park and those types of things, so just the integration of the community and hearing feedback and understanding that at a deeper level is going to be very important as we move forward.
And I would also add Mr. Moore as a resident of that neighborhood, and Ms. Warwick, as she's constantly through that every single day. So, thank you, Stephen.
thank you.
Any other questions before we turn Stephen loose? Chris,
Just
you-
want to make one more statement that this is a unique project to urban renewal because everything we've done to date has been bare land or close to bare land. This is probably 70% residential, very, very old residential, but so determining feasibility and things like that on a project like this might be different than anything we've experienced before. It'll be an interesting project.
Good point. Thank you, Stephen.
Thank you, appreciate it.
Our second agenda item is an action item. It's to select a vendor for the feasibility study on the Lee Jenke Urban Renewal Site-Specific. And Ray Lynn.
So within your packet, I believe there's an email. I believe the chairman and Commissioner Moore met with Cushing Terrell about a feasibility study, and that price came back above $25,000. And so I talked to a couple city staff members who recommended previous financial director LJ White, and so I talked to him, and he gave me a not to exceed $3,000 to do this site-specific feasibility study. I don't have an email from him, and I don't have a letter yet because ultimately I wanted to bring it up to the commissioners first before we went that next step. So I just need some direction, and then I'd be happy to execute that agreement, which one.
Great. Thanks, Ray Lynn. Mr. Moore.
Mr. Chairman, question. Raylan, did he give a time frame and when that could be completed or completed?
We did not discuss his time frame. However, I did stress the urgency of it, and so he is going to recreate his previous work that he did for the north, and so the time frame I would expect would be pretty quick.
So you feel pretty comfortable with his work?
Yes.
That's all I have.
Great. Thank you, Dave. Any other questions? Well, would somebody like to make a motion that we pursue this avenue of? Yes, Chris.
I would certainly support it. I would love to see something in writing before we actually, with dates and things like that, but having seen his work in the past, he's done it a million times and knows what he's doing, so I know it would be accurate. It's just, but I would love to see something in writing before we sign off.
Thank you, Chris. Do you think we could have those documents by our next meeting?
I'm pretty sure we could have those documents. I think we could have them next week if needed. I'm just thinking, there was the stress of the urgency of it, and so like if we were to get it executed next week, the hope would be maybe by the next meeting we could have the feasibility study.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay.
So, Mr. Chair, maybe whoever makes the motion can put some time constraints on it as well as a top end of 3,000.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Moore.
comment. So when we met with Cushing Terrell, they gave us a study of $25,000, and that wouldn't start until June. Is that right? And it was going to take 60 to 90 days to complete. They also gave us a flash plan study, which they said would probably suffice with a smaller one-off parcel like that one. And they came back and said that was $12,000. So if Mr. Wade can get that done for $3,000 and it's quality work, I don't know why we wouldn't move forward on that. Getting a contract and dates and times.
So would somebody like to make a motion?
I move that we contract with LJ Wade for this feasibility study, not to exceed $3,000, and a contract to come soon.
Very good.
Second.
Motion. We have a second by Ms. Warwick. Any further discussion? Would the secretary call the roll?
Commissioner Allgood,
Yes.
Commissioner Cole,
Yes.
Chairman Porter,
Yes.
Commissioner Warwick,
Yes.
Commissioner Doty,
Yes.
Commissioner Moore.
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. This brings us to our last item. It's a discussion item to discuss the financial concepts regarding the Caldwell North Urban Renewal Agency District and plans to help raise some revenue for infrastructure out there. So who is leading the charge on this one?
I guess I can start, and then we're kind of tag teaming it. So last meeting, you heard a couple concepts from Mr. Hilty on options. And I think we met with Rob and Stephen and city staff to try to determine which is going to be the best option between both urban renewal and the city budget. And so I think also putting priorities of projects in the north area of where the money is going to be spent the best and most wisest for our investment to gain back increment, which then we would be able to reinvest into the area. So I'm going to turn it over to Rob first to talk about the projects, because I think that will help start this discussion.
Rob, do we have extra copies for those in the crowd that may want one of these, or?
I have some extra.
Okay, thank you. I figured Counselor Stoddard would want one, but he wasn't so grabby there, so.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and Commission. I'm here to just talk briefly about some of the projects that we have identified and which projects really, in my mind, would take priority over other projects. A lot of the projects in this packet, I apologize, this is a little bit lengthy, and so I'm not going to go through all this, but it identifies a lot of the projects that are going to be needed. It certainly does not identify all of them. And what you have here are some projects that are very isolated and project dependent, and then you have other projects in here that are more of a regional benefit to the area. And so if you look through, let's see if I can. Is there a way to scroll on this? We go to page 4. If you turn to page 4, that shows a funding option number 1. And then on page 5 is a funding option number 2. And really what we're looking at here is there are 2 potential areas that we could focus our efforts on. One of them is a southern area that creates a waterline loop in Chicago Road that comes all the way up and around and connects back into the Indian Springs RV Park from the other side, creating a waterline loop that improves pressure and serviceability and redundancy. And then the other option 2 focuses more on the north side of 2026, which would be the Miguel Gotti's parcel and some of that area up there. At the end of the day, it really makes sense to focus on the projects where we know that we have development coming in. And so areas where development's not certain, it's a little harder for us to justify going in and building roads and putting water line in when we don't know for sure if a project's going to come in that location. The request that was given to me was to look at city department funding, public works funding, to see if we would be able to front some of the costs for some of these projects. And right now, because we are right in the middle of budgeting for the city, it has become apparent that many of our budgets do not have excess funding to be able to go in and spend $2 million on a water line. That's not absolutely necessary to the, to the current residents of Caldwell. We did determine in our wastewater treatment plant that with our fund balance that we could probably loan out $2 to $3 million. And that's probably a max loan out, and that could be used to help with a water line or some other improvement that needs to be done. Our water budget would not be able to loan anything out or probably focus on any of these projects at this time. And then our street department budget is of a similar situation. As you look at these funding options 1 and 2, these are basically just taking projects out of the entire packet that were on that front page. Clearly, in my mind, a priority project is a municipal well in this area. And the reason is because this entire area is served off of a single water line currently. And without any redundancy, it's very risky adding commercial or industrial businesses to the water system. So a secondary well would be necessary, and that would provide the redundancy. We've had some discussions with Caldwell Housing Authority, and probably somewhere up on the north edge of their property is where we would look at installing that well. We have a newly constructed water loop that runs up and around the Caldwell Housing Authority, and that would be a great location for us to tie into that system and push water back down the hill into this entire area. From there, we have several other projects, and again, some of these are more project-oriented, but I would say probably the most critical 2 projects in my mind are projects number 15 and projects number 14. That would include an additional water line loop and then the well for the water system. So that's where I would place my focus. And then, like I said, we could provide probably some funding out of the sewer department fund balance, assuming that it was going to be reimbursed, and that could go toward a water project as long as that budget is, or that balance gets refunded back to the wastewater treatment plant, either by the water department in the future, but preferably by the urban renewal allocation. With that said, I am happy to go into any detail on any of these other projects in this packet or answer any questions at this time.
Thank you, Rob. Questions?
I just have a generalized question, whether it's for Rob or Ray Lan or whoever. Which option do you feel the most comfortable with? And maybe we'll hear from both of you.
I can voice my opinion based on it's hard to say. There's a lot of demand and requests. We have some development prospects that have offered to come in and build some of this infrastructure with the assumption that they would get reimbursed over time. And that is clearly the best option for us because the city's not fronting, or urban renewal is not fronting the funds. And a developer's coming in and building everything and then getting reimbursed. And so that would be my preference on some of these, and I think as we look down at option 1, which is kind of the southern part, it sounds like that may be the direction that some of that development is going. I still feel like we have to step forward and get moving on the well project, so that's critical, and then there may be a couple other things. Option 2, I think is also a very good, would be great to move forward on. There has been a lot of discussion of potential development in that area, the old mink farm area. But without any firm commitments, it's hard to justify going in there and just starting to build everything out. And so I have a little bit of hesitation there, but I really want to make sure that as developers, or as these developers start getting maybe a little bit more firm commitments from certain potential tenants, that we're able to adapt and really put the infrastructure in where the needs are identified. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, you didn't tell me option 1 or 2, but there are a couple that repeat themselves in option 1 and 2. So it isn't like you can switch midway, but I'd like to hear from Ray Lan of what that causes and what the issues with her that would cause if is she looking for us to pick a direction, or I don't know if that's me or you or who that is, but or start on the projects that both are on option 1 and option 2.
So, yeah, Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Doty, let me just clarify a little bit. My preference would be probably neither option. Incomplete is what we want to move forward on from a funding standpoint. But I would say project number 14 and 15 are two that we definitely want to focus on.
And just so the audience knows, 15 repeats itself on option 2, but 14 does not.
Yeah.
So
So project 15 is the municipal well, and then project 14 is a complete water line loop that provides redundancy and improved pressure in the entire area. So those two projects benefit the entire area. And so I think it's a no-brainer probably to focus on those two projects.
thank you.
Rob, I have a quick question. Maverick, who's already underway out there, where are they drawing their water and where are they disposing their sewer?
Mr. Chairman, they are pulling their water from across 2026, basically from the water stub and sewer stub at the end of the Canyon Springs RV Park. They're just tying onto the end of that line and pulling water across the highway.
All right, thank you. Mr. Allgood?
Yeah, I noticed that project number 14 and 15, the costs exceed what you said we have available if we were to borrow money from the sewer to wastewater treatment plant. Also, just for the commissioner, I mean, I'm 100% support of this, but I'm concerned that so early in this whole urban renewal area that we're having so many demands so quickly. Because when we did the East project, it ramped up kind of at a slower pace, a really slow pace to begin with, and we were able to build increment over time that could help support it. But at this point, we have the increment is very small. It's not supporting itself, and so the current demands are worrying me. I don't want to extend the agency out further than we can support. I'm very concerned about that.
Yep, thank you. Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Allgood, I certainly agree with that, and it's difficult, it's the chicken and the egg. A lot of development won't come in until there's some infrastructure there. Some of it shouldn't come in my opinion, until we have the water system, fully functional and have a well. You brought up a good point. Those first two items, they do exceed what we would be able to loan out of the wastewater treatment plant fund, but we could at least start on probably one of them. Some of these areas may be areas where the developer is willing to come in and start building some of that infrastructure and then have a TIF agreement or some kind of a reimbursement over time, and that would be probably the preference on some of that. There were a couple other options for funding, and I don't know if we were going to get into the details or if we already talked about those in a prior meeting, but there were other options as well that put a little bit more load or burden on some of the development for, through an LID or some kind of a payoff plan. But at the end of the day, there are a couple things that we may be able to start internally, and we're just not going to be able to get very far on the budgets that we have available currently.
Thanks, Rob. Any other questions? Mr. Moore?
What, on a loan like that, what's the payback to the city on interest? I mean, is there?
I will defer
With
that.
an internal loan, we set the interest rate. Usually it's market rate of some sort, whatever the market rate is, or whatever with investments that we're losing that present value off of.
So are we going to talk more about an LID option as well? Will we explore that too, along with this, with specifics? Not to create more work for you, but.
No, that's totally fine. I was just going to comment on a couple of things. So with Rob's proposal of the internal loan, I will just say, first of all, that would have to go to City Council for approval. That's not just automatic, something that within the Finance Department that we can do. On top of that, I think we have to take a three-prong approach with this. One, have city help us with some of these city-funded internal loan options to do these projects. talk to developers about TIF agreements that are in process, that development is coming in, and look at LIDs that we can do. The city wouldn't necessarily, right now the city doesn't bond for LIDs, but if we did a LID within the north area, my recommendation would be to do a bond, that then we would have some sort of agreement where increment would help the developers or the property owners pay that assessment instead of it going directly to the property owners. So helping that increment, because however, in the beginning, that might be slow, the property owner is probably going to be on the hook for that, and then over time, the increment will be available to pay for that. So I think that it is a three-prong approach. It's just working through those processes and getting buy-in from developers to help us make this area build out, so.
Mr. Hilty?
Yeah, if I may weigh in on that, Commissioner Moore, I think as we go forward, we're gonna find that the LID-backed bond is gonna be it's gonna be more attractive to somebody who's not necessarily a property owner that is building for speculation or looking for a user to come in. It's gonna be a powerful tool if we have somebody come in who wants to build, you know, a $300 million facility. And the reason it's more attractive is they have control over that structure. They know they're gonna build it. They know that once it builds out, there will be substantial increment, so that they really won't have to pay on their guarantee on those LID bonds, that the agency will have that increment. It's far more risky for a property owner who is you know, looking for somebody to come to their development to sign on to that LID, because if that user doesn't come and the increment's not generated, they're gonna be on the hook personally. Well, it attaches to the property, of course, but they'd have to pay those LIDs. So I think as we look at that LID, I think it's a good tool for Stephen to go out and recruit that, hey, this is a possibility. There'd be some bonding for those upfront capital investments that you'll need to make. Yes, you're gonna have to guarantee them, but if you do what you say you're gonna do, then there should be increment. And of course, we'll have to run the numbers at the time once we have specifics, but there will be some increment that could go then to service those bonds. So I think we're gonna find the Frescas of the world potentially interested in that, you know, where just the property owners who are marketing their property for users, that might be a little bit of a risk for them.
Yeah, much more or less stressful than option one or option two, which is generous, but it puts a stress level on the city.
Stephen, if I could have you come up and share just a couple of thoughts, because we know that you went to the wall to bring in a certain manufacturer that ended up over in Nampa, precisely because we just weren't ready for them. Can you kind of walk us through that? And I think we are free to say it was Tractor Supply, and a good fit for our particular community, would have been a great asset. So why don't you walk us through what happened to lose that particular business?
Yeah, Chairman, this was one, so we were the first city to probably interact with them. You know, we had a lot of meetings and whatnot. There's a ton of investment on the front end in terms of time and energy and all that. And what we try to do is we get in the room and interact on a pretty high level regarding all the components of the project. Public Works is heavily involved, engineering, our development team as a whole. So we developed a pretty strong relationship with them. It really came down to a number of factors. The site itself was rather raw. I mean, it's a large swath of property in the north area, and as you know, as you start getting into, you know, Farmway Road up between Highway 44 in that area, it definitely starts changing on you a little bit in terms of development-ready sites. The other factor that they struggled with was annexation and the timing for their project. They had a more immediate need for development, and when you deal with annexation and some of the logistics of that, that's a challenge. The site is still not annexed into the city, though, so that would have come up inevitably anyway. So that was another factor that led to, I think, us losing that project ultimately. But I think for me, as it relates to this approach, and I agree with Ray Lynn on Ms. North as far as her understanding of maybe a three-pronged approach. saying, let's take care of what we can control, certain elements of it, but we're not going to be able to do it all. But there's going to be, at least get us moving in the right direction. I think to the extent that we can put a well in the ground and be prepared for a water line to connect to that through a loop system, it just helps our odds. It just gives us greater odds to land a bigger project, because we're going to ultimately need to do that anyway. It reminds me a lot of a substation, but with Idaho Power, working with them. There's a side of my brain that's like, man, I wish we could front load some of those components into the substation, because they can't build it unless the customer comes, and then they have to go through that process. But it takes a couple years for that substation to get off the ground and actually be ready to support a project. So it's just the timing of things. And many times when they approach us, they're at the point where they need to go. So anything that we can do to advance these necessary infrastructure improvements is going to help our odds. So even if we were to do one or two of these things, in my opinion, it certainly helps us move the needle a little further.
Any other questions for Stephen while he's there? Mr. Allgood.
So we got a whole bunch of things going on here. If we're doing LIDs, or considering that as one of our three-prong approach, we need to be annexed in the city before we do that, am I correct?
Correct.
So that annexation needs to come sooner than later before we can move to that next step. Now, if we were to fund the well out at the Farmway Village, that's something we can use whether we're annexed in the city or not. Am I correct, Mr. McDonald? Yeah. But LIDs and things like that, we have to be zoned first, correct? Okay.
Yeah, Chairman, our Commissioner, all good. I believe that's true. And yeah, that annexation is inevitable, but it's certainly something that we need to address and make sure that we can get those properties into the city and start executing on that plan.
Thank you, Chris. Any other questions? Mr. Cole?
Yeah, from start to finish, how long does it take to annex?
That's a great question. So Chairman, Commissioner Cole, typically what we try to encourage property owners to do, if they're so inclined to annex anyway into the city, we like them to get ahead of it with their neighborhood meeting if they're able to. And I know Caldwell Housing Authority has done that. We have another property owner in the area that is planning to do that as well. So in anticipation of annexation, they already have that step taken care of. I would say start to finish with BVA and North Ranch, it took them about 2 to 3 months to annex. I would say in this era that we're in terms of the growth and the scheduling and everything else that's happening in Caldwell, I would probably give it more of a 3 to 4 month time frame. Thank you.
Mr. Allgood?
This is just discussion item, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I would certainly encourage us to explore the opportunity with item number 15, the well at Farmway Village as a starting point. And then once we have annexation into the city, then we need to go on the other two. But I think it would be prudent to start our well plans now if we can do it.
Thank you, Chris. Any other comments? Again, this was just a discussion item. Rob, anything else that you think we need to know?
Mr. Chairman, nothing in particular. Keep in mind that this document is a living document. It'll be constantly changing, and I'm happy to come back and do updates at any point.
Very good. Okay, that takes us to a motion for adjournment. Anybody in the mood? Okay, we have a motion. We have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody. Appreciate you.